Hey you guys, welcome to Drawing with Michael. I am, of course, Michael. Today we're going to do about a 10-minute art tip. Hopefully, let me set my watch to make sure that we're not going to go over, because I am rather long-winded whenever it comes to explaining things, unfortunately. So I've had a lot of questions in reference to just beginning drawing and stuff like that. My advice to the beginner, I think, would probably be just to start looking around your world. Right? Looking around your world, start tuning your observation skills to kind of think and using your eyeballs to pick out certain aspects of your world that hopefully will translate and relate back over to your drawing. Drawing is a skill, and it can be learned. It's basically training your eyeballs to see a certain way and then translating that information down into your wrist, into your hand. It takes a lifetime to develop these things. But today, I think that one of the things that I really want to focus on is, thinking three-dimensionally. I've said this 100 times before in my other videos, and it's very important that we understand thinking three-dimensionally. What does that really mean? One of the things that I like to do whenever I draw is basically break things down into simple shapes. Simple shapes are something we all relate to because, from birth, we've been taught certain shapes have certain meanings, and we want to understand what these shapes are, right? So we have your square, your triangle, your circle, and then we get into a little bit more organic, right? Maybe there's a maybe there's a water droplet, maybe maybe we have an odd shape. Maybe the odd shape comes down like this. And maybe we have just a squiggly kind of an odd shape. All these things have relevance in the world of drawing and translating 2D, 2D being two dimensions, height and width, to a third dimension, which would be depth. One of the things that we have to realize is we're drawing on a 2D surface, and we're looking at it and touching it, even though it is 3D in our world. Whenever we touch it, we can't stick our hands into the paper. So that's very important. So what you have to do is kind of fake your brain and your eyeballs into seeing these things. So you have to start thinking and translating your world of three-dimensionality and how you see things like this in and through this barrier that is the page. So what I do typically is I'll start, like if I'm doing a portrait or a face, I'll draw things that help me identify this as a three-dimensional object. So this being just this simple shape, looks kind of like a bean, right? So if I start manipulating this image and start drawing in certain things using certain values and tones to shade, it starts giving the shape on the page, on the 2D surface, something called form, right? Form is very important, especially whenever we start dealing in the world of making characters and making things look three-dimensionally. I look at a circle, and most of the times I'll see a circle, but also I'll see a sphere. And a sphere is important, if we relate it to like an object that we have in our world, such as a basketball. If we look at a basketball and it has these pre-done lattice lines, and we can kind of see the construction lines and how things are formed. And then whenever we include a light source, let's say the light is shined here, we know intuitively, because we live in the three-dimensional world, that light goes around forms and basically creates shadows to really shape and help define that image in the three-dimensional space. I know that's a lot of words, but unfortunately it's hard for me as an artist and a teacher sometimes to really convey these things in words and principles that helps you understand it as a layman. A layman, somebody that doesn't really understand. If you're ignorant about something, that doesn't mean that you're stupid. That means that you just don't understand or don't know the information that's relevant to what you're doing. So, whenever I look at things on this 2D surface, I don't think this as a 2D surface. I'm always think of it in terms of relationship, perspective, my relationship to the object that I'm drawing, right? So if I look at this and I know that it's kind of a teardrop shape, what I start intuitively doing in my brain and drawing are these really light construction lines. And I'm thinking and I'm not doing these just to arbitrarily put them in. I don't do this and be like, You know, I watched whenever I was trying to teach this concept to students, a lot of time they would do this because they would try and emulate what I was doing. I wasn't trying to basically say, you put a bunch of lines on there. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is to educate you in realizing that this is not a flat surface anymore. This is a three-dimensional space. Just like if you were to look at something out in the distance that's smaller because it's farther away, what you have to realize is your brain looks at that, and since you have two eyeballs, it looks at things like in a binocular type relationship. You know, it shows distance, it shows form, you see light and shadow, you see size relationship. You know, and whenever I look at this image right here that I've drawn these little itty bitty lines on here, not because I just want to draw them on here, it's because I can, it's something that I've developed over ages and ages of drawing and also looking at things. I look at something, and you should do this as well, look at something such as a stuffed animal. I've got this little quirky stuffed animal right here. This is a Fuggler. I purchased this for my son, and then of course I took it from him because I really like it. But whenever I look at this, I don't look at this with a 2D mind or eye. I look at this with a 3D mind because it's in my world, a 3D world. It has height, it has width, and then I know that this curves, there's a depth to it. So whenever I turn it on its side, like this, I can see the depth. Now, I see it from my perspective. There's a depth and a width. So whenever I look at it like this, I know that there's a thickness to it, there's a weight, there's roundness. I can see all these things. So I know intuitively in my brain that whenever I draw something like this, it has that same effect on my brain as that stuffed animal. So I look at that and I say, okay, way up here, here's the side right here, and there's a side that I can't see. That side that kind of wraps around. Okay? I'm not drawing straight across because that will flatten everything. I'm thinking in terms of three-dimensionality, so I'm looking at this as a rounded surface. And that's why whenever you start drawing details in, you have to always think of that 3D surface. It's round, right? Off in the distance, this is a little bit further away, and this comes around here, and it's got that three-dimensional curvature. So if I want to put, let's say, an eyeball on here, I don't draw it flat like this, a circle. I'm going to curve it, right, as it relates on that surface. And if it comes over here, this shape is what I'm going to draw, but I'm going to draw it in such a way that now that shape is going to turn. Okay? Just like if I were to draw it in perspective like this. Okay? So I'm not looking at it straight on. Now it's curved on that surface, so I'm going to draw it curved like this. It becomes an oval instead of just that simple circle. So this is very relevant whenever you start drawing. Let me see where we're at in terms of time. 8 minutes, only got 2 minutes left. In terms of whenever you start drawing characters. So let's start out with a circle. Everybody can draw a circle, okay? What you have to start immediately when you put this mark on the surface is start thinking in terms of three-dimensionality. Now, I am not drawing, okay? I'm not drawing. And it sounds very weird to say that because you are drawing. You're like, Mike, why would you even think that? I am not drawing. I am sculpting, okay? I am sculpting this drawing. I literally look at this right now, and it's just going to be a simple face character. I've already started thinking in terms of three-dimensionality, okay? So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start drawing simple shapes to help me relate to what I'm drawing. Now, I'm going to start sculpting, okay? So now, here's, instead of drawing an ear, right, like this, on the side view, because that's how a lot of us kind of view ears, right? We think of ears as this side view. Instead of doing this, now that ear is going to do what? It's going to come out, it's going to turn, and it's going to come out like this. So now, I'm going to bring the back of the head around. I'm going to bring this ear forward a little bit. See, now, it has a relationship as it applies to the object that I'm drawing. I'm sculpting this, okay? So then I have this face come out, chin, and then you have these lines that come around. Okay, maybe he's got a hairline that comes here. And if you look, I'm automatically starting to relate to this image much more as if I'm looking at it. You know, I think a lot of times, a lot of people get so frustrated with drawing because they don't want to put anything down on the page. So now, what has happened? So now I'm thinking at this in terms of just basic shapes. I have my circle and sphere. Now I've started to kind of connect things in perspective. You know, I'm not drawing hair in terms of a side view, right? Maybe a side view of hair. Here's the sideburn. Here's the ear, right? In that 2D. Now I'm turning it just like this. Just like if I were to have a, you know, we all can relate to this, and how that box and how we're bringing it basically into that three-dimensional world. So now we have height, we have width, but more importantly, here's the big factor right here, depth. That depth is what helps define this image to have form, and that's important. But what's really cool is once you start getting in here and you start defining, like here's the back of his head. I can't see the other part of his head, but I know that this curves around. I know that this curves around. I know that it curves around to the back. And then I start really looking for common areas. So here's the center of the face. So now you guys can understand that I'm drawing a face. Okay, so here's the eyebrows. Here's the center part of the nose. And it's going to come down, because this is the upper part of the nose. And I'm thinking, look, I'm thinking the whole time, this has a top, it has a side, okay? And then it has another side that I can't see. Here's that part of the face, right? It comes out. Here's the cheek. Here's that part of the jowl. And here's the chin. And basically what I'm doing is I'm starting to sculpt. Now that I've started really showing you where stuff is, there's that circle. And it's not a circle. It's a compressed circle because, again, look where it is on the face, okay? Here's the cheek. And it's kind of weird thinking this way, I think, sometimes, but whenever you get it, oh man, do you get it. There's something that happens, I think, when you start thinking three-dimensionally. And two, what I think sometimes happens is you don't understand anatomy, and that's why it's important. Oh, I'm at 13 minutes. That's important that you got to realize that I understand the way a skull looks, right? Before I start putting in all of the things that make a face. It's important that you look at the underlying structure, even if it's very simple and rudimentary, and how far back, right, things go. I think sometimes what we really need to do is just stop. You know, start looking at the world in a different way, you know, and really help yourself in studying the way skulls are developed, not developed, they look, and how they are under the face. And this applies to characters, guys. It applies to characters. It applies, now this ear is a little bit too far forward, but what's going to happen is if you watch, so I typically will start, if I'm doing a face like this, I'll start on this side, and because what's going to happen is this eye will get defined, and then this eye is in relation to this eye. It's got a distance. There is a formula for it, you know, for creating faces. Now, of course, if you want to, you know, stylize and whatnot, but we're not doing that right now. So I'm gonna do an eyebrow. This comes up as the bridge of the nose, comes to that ocular cavity, and kind of carries that brow up and over. And here's that other brow that comes up and over. Okay, so then I use this outer part of the cheek to kind of come up, and then I use this part of the brow that comes to this side right here where that cavity is, that ocular cavity, and here's the eye. And of course you can do whatever you want in terms of stylization. You can make small eyes, big eyes. I'm just trying to show you guys in terms of three-dimensionality. And then I kind of hop over, and I know since I can't see, here's the inner part of that eye that I can't see. Okay, right about here. And I want it to be on that same line, since his face is 3/4 view, and then it's tilted and forward. It's forward just slightly, so this eye is going to be a little bit lower. And 2, just sketching it in. And I'm going to show you guys something here in a second that'll help you. Not my best, but you know what? It's going to be okay for right now, because I'm going to show you something here that'll help you understand where I'm coming from. So I think what happens, and I noticed this a lot whenever I was teaching, the propensity to treat certain aspects of the human face as a 2D surface, it was astonishing, because I would watch students really struggle with the placement of the eyes and where things were supposed to go. And I was constantly saying, well, you need to learn your anatomy. And then, you know, and that's just a blanket statement that I think, unfortunately, a lot of the students like, yeah, okay, like I'm going to sit there, I'm going to learn how to do all this, you know, really complex anatomy work, when at the end of the day, I just want to do characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a skull underneath to help you guys understand how I see things. So I put stuff in here, just a simple face. Now we're going to think in terms of form. So we're going to draw the eyebrow in really quick. So then we're going to do the cheek. Since I got the cheek over here, I'm going to have it pudge out just a little bit. And then he's got these lines that come here, and this little lip. Maybe comes out like this. And even the cartoon face will have some semblance and accuracy in terms of anatomy of how things relate. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you in terms of how I was thinking. So I've drawn in a little bit of the nose cavity here. So then here's the cheekbone right underneath, and you're going to have this area right here that comes around. I don't know the name of it. It's like maxillus, or. And then here's the inner part of the skull, and here's that other cheekbone. Right? And here's the ocular cavity. And this is what's important. Most of the time, people draw eyes too small, or the shapes are incorrect. So what I like to do is I like to think in terms of how big is really that ocular cavity. Because this eyebrow typically will sit right on that bone. So here is the actual size of the skull that it's sitting in. And here it comes up here. It comes down. And all this area right here is muscle. That's why a lot of times you'll see, and it's curved, because the skull is up here. And then this comes here. Now, obviously, this is cartoony, so I'm not going to get into logistics. And then you have this jawbone that comes right. It splits a little bit, and it's connected. And you have the skull. It comes all the way back here, since I actually made that a little bit too short. And here's the ear cavity. But here's that jaw that comes down. We're going to come up just a little bit here. And you have the teeth that come here. Right? You have this jaw that comes up, and then you have the teeth that come here, and here's that other part of the skull that's kind of hidden. And here's the teeth. Right, they come up here. So what I'm trying to show you guys is this underlying structure is something you're going to have to learn, especially if you're going to do character design or anything like that. But what's really cool is certain aspects, you know, the skull, if you show one skull next to another skull, the differences are so slight. You look at those skulls and they look identical, but they're not. Some bones pooch out more. If we've had broken bones on the face, right, this comes down like this, and here's the top part of the teeth. Maybe you have split here, split here, split here. And this is stuff that's inside of the jaw and the mouth. Right? And here's the jaw. I know it's kind of convoluted, and what I'm trying to basically explain to you guys is the three-dimensionality that you have to bring to the table. Here's that other part right here, and here's that fat that comes here. Because whenever you start adding, I call it the shell, then there's a lot of freedom, and gravity starts affecting the shell, right? If you have an older person, you know, maybe gravity is pulling down on everything, and you have these jowls. You know, you ever heard that term jowl? And it starts pulling everything. And here's the, comes here, and here's the opening of the mouth. Okay. Here's that nose that comes here. Cavity. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today, is that, you know, in terms of understanding how to draw, this is a small portion of learning how to draw three-dimensionally. Can you draw two-dimensionally? Sure, can. But the thing is most people, in understanding how to translate a 3D world to a 2D world, will go through these different exercises and steps to help you learn where stuff is. Now, can you stretch and pull and stretch? Yeah, it's like if I wanted to do, you know, a really long, you know, skull, you know, I can do a really long one. So let's do a really long one. Okay, maybe the eyes are way up here. So let's do way up here. And here's the nose, cavity. Okay. And this is, of course, this is stylization. Okay, so then we have the cavity here. We got that brow line that comes here. Maybe it's abbreviated. And we got the jaw that comes here. And then what I'm going to do is this comes down, way down like this. Okay, so then I have these teeth come like this, right? And then it goes like this. Okay. It goes like this. And maybe got a little bump up here. Here's the back of the head. Goes like this. Maybe there's fangs. Okay. And this underlying structure will affect what your character will look like, right? You know, and if I decide, you know, oh, I'm going to have this nose come out, and it sits right here. Right there. I've got that jawline comes here, and then I've got that lip here. And here's that bottom lip. Okay, and then I come back and, like, depending on the shape of the head, so I've got his nose in, I'm going to give him a little bit of fat here. Comes here. And here's the back of his head. Okay, here's his ear. We'll make it kind of pointed just for fun. How about that? This comes up like this. And now, in terms of his eyes, so I'm going to come up with this one. So I'm going to make them like this, straight across. Like that. Sits inside of that ocular cavity, just like I showed before. Right? Okay. And then that brow line here. Brow line to here. Color that in. Okay, maybe he's got some hair here. He's kind of an aging guy, so maybe we'll have a maybe an aging vampire. That would be funny. Get the hair that comes here. And again, maybe I got like the nose. There we go. You see how this works? You can create anything. You stretch that skull. You think how, you know, that underlying structure. Give him a cool cape. That underlying structure and how you can define that. You just have to think in terms of three-dimensionality. Understand that there is a three-dimensional structure underneath. Got his lip that comes here, and the other one comes out, just slightly. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today. Oh, we're at 27 minutes. That 10-minute art tip turned into a 27-minute tutorial about drawing faces three-dimensionally. My apologies. Also, I'm trying to get a good camera set up. If you guys can recommend anything. I'm kind of not doing so well in terms of placement of the camera. I've got a camera set up here that's supposed to have it, you know, a top view, but I keep having it run into my head, and that's not a good thing. And I've positioned it on the table. I'm just having some challenges that ultimately I don't really want to deal with. I just want to draw. So here, we'll give him a little. Let's give him a mullet. He's like, business in the front, party in the back, bruh. Party in the back, let's do this. So, anyway, thank you guys for liking and subscribing. Hopefully you learned something today. I will be doing things like this a little bit more often, just because I'm not teaching in a professional capacity anymore. So hopefully you guys will learn something. Thank you guys for visiting, and we'll see you soon. Bye.